CRT. Ever wonder why those old TV screens were basically huge, heavy glass boxes? We called them CRTs. And honestly, they were less like modern screens and more like tiny high voltage particle accelerators. Inside that vacuum sealed glass, there's an emitter at the back. It sends a continuous stream of electrons flying toward the front. The front of the glass is coated in millions of tiny phosphor dots that glow whenever they get hit. To draw an image, powerful magnets wiggle that beam back and forth thousands of times per second, like a hyperactive kid with a flashlight painting a wall in the dark. If you ever touched the screen and felt that weird static crackle, you were feeling a literal layer of electricity waiting to jump. Those screens were so heavy because the glass had to be infused with lead to block X-rays generated during the process. You were basically staring at a controlled radiation shield every Saturday morning. Because they didn't have fixed pixels, CRTs could change resolutions instantly without getting blurry, which is why retro games still look way better on them than on a 4K flat screen. They had a soul, a hum, and a warmth that made your bedroom feel alive, even if they did take 3 ngoi to move across the hallway. Projection TV. Imagine you're at the movies, but instead of that massive theater, you've shrunk the whole setup to fit inside a box in your living room. That is essentially what a projection TV is. Back before we had these paper-thin OLED panels, we had to get creative to get a big picture. Think of it like a high-tech shadow puppet show. Inside the cabinet, there's a tiny, incredibly bright light source, sometimes even 3 separate colored tubes for red, green, and blue aimed at a series of mirrors. These mirrors bounce the light around like a pinball machine until it hits the back of the screen you're actually looking at. It's a bit of a mechanical marathon. Because the light has to travel a certain distance to grow into a large image, these TVs were famously chunky. You couldn't exactly hang a 200-pound box on your drywall. Interestingly, these systems actually shared a lot of DNA. With the optical tech found in early overhead projectors your teachers used, just swapped out for moving images. The screen itself isn't just plastic either. It's covered in tiny ridges called lenticular lenses that make sure the light hits your eyes instead of scattering toward the ceiling. It's a beautifully complex way to watch a sitcom relying on physics and mirrors rather than just rows of tiny glowing pixels. Plasma TV. If you've ever touched an old plasma TV after it's been on for an hour, you probably noticed it felt like a space heater. There is a wild reason for that heat. These screens were essentially grids of millions of tiny neon lights. We call them plasma because each individual pixel is a microscopic chamber filled with noble gases like neon and xenon. When the TV sends an electrical charge into one of these tiny pockets, the gas gets so excited, it turns into plasma and releases ultraviolet light. That light hits a phosphor coating, which finally glows the color you see. It is basically a controlled lightning storm happening inside a glass sandwich. Because each pixel creates its own light, plasma TVs became the gold standard for movie nights. When the screen needs to show pitch black, those pixels simply turn off completely. This gives you deep, inky shadows that early LCDs could only dream of. One quirky detail I always loved is that these TVs actually struggle at high altitudes. Because the gas inside is pressurized, the thin air in places like Denver can cause the glass to buzz or even fail. They also sucked up so much power that they could actually interfere with radio signals in your house. They were heavy power hungry and ran hot, yet they offered a picture quality that felt organic and alive in a way modern tech still tries to replicate. LCD TV. Imagine standing in a dark room with a massive flashlight behind a set of shutters. That is the basic soul of an LCD TV. The liquid crystal part sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it refers to a weird state of matter that behaves like a liquid while keeping its molecules organized like a solid. These crystals sit in tiny shutters across your screen. Behind them, there is a big panel of light. These were essentially miniature office fluorescent tubes called CCFLs, constantly trying to shine through. When you want to see a specific color or image, the TV sends a tiny zap of electricity to those crystals. This makes them physically twist and turn, acting like microscopic shutters that either block the light or let it pass through colored filters. It is a surprisingly mechanical process for something so digital. If you've ever noticed your screen looking a bit washed out when viewed from a weird angle, that is because those crystals are physically layered deep within the glass, creating a narrow tunnel for the light to escape. Even when the screen shows black, that big flashlight in the back is still glowing. The crystals are just doing their absolute best to hold the door shut. It's a clever game of light blocking that redefined how we build everything from old-school calculators to the high-end monitors on our desks. LED TV. If you've ever wondered why TVs suddenly stopped being bulky boxes and started looking like thin sheets of glass, you have the LED to thank. Most people felt like they were buying something brand new when they upgraded to an LED TV, though they were actually getting a super efficient evolution of the classic LCD. Think of it like swapping out a clunky flickering office lamp for 1,000 tiny powerful flashlights. In an LED screen, those light-emitting diodes are the unsung heroes sitting behind the picture, providing the glow that makes the colors pop. Older screens used fragile, gas-filled tubes that took a while to warm up, much like a basement light struggling to life. LEDs change the game because they are semiconductors, the same family of tech that powers the CPU in your gaming rig. Because these tiny lights can be scattered across the back of the panel or even just lined up along the edges, manufacturers finally managed to shave inches off the frame. Some high-end models even use a clever trick called local dimming, where the TV turns off specific groups of LEDs during dark scenes. This helps prevent that annoying gray glow when you're watching a movie in a dark room. It is a brilliant bit of engineering that made our displays brighter, thinner, and way more energy efficient. 3D TV? Watching a 3D TV always felt like a bit of a magic trick, but the science behind it is actually a clever manipulation of how our brains process space. Since your eyes are about 2 inches apart, they each see a slightly different perspective of the world. 3D TVs simply feed those individual perspectives 2 different sets of information at the same time. The real heavy lifting happened right on your face. If you use those battery-powered active glasses, you were essentially wearing 2 tiny LCD screens as lenses. These shutters would flicker open and closed faster than you could blink, perfectly timed with the TV's refresh rate. The TV would show a frame for the left eye, then a frame for the right, and the glasses would block the opposite eye in total sync. This required the screen to push out a massive amount of data, effectively doubling the frame rate to keep things smooth. You might remember the passive glasses too, which used the same polarization tech found in the screen of a classic Nintendo DS to filter light. While the trend eventually faded, mostly because wearing heavy glasses to watch the news felt a bit silly. It was a wild era where we pushed display controllers and infrared emitters to their absolute limits just to see a movie character pop out of the frame. OLED, QLED. Choosing between OLED and QLED is a bit like choosing between a high-end sports car and a reliable heavy-duty truck. On one side, we have OLED, where the O stands for organic. These screens are made of carbon-based materials that actually glow all by themselves. Imagine a stadium where every single person in the crowd holds their own flashlight. When the director wants a scene to be pitch black, those individuals simply turn their lights off. This creates a level of contrast that makes images look painted onto the glass, though the organic nature means they technically have a shelf life and can dim over many years of heavy use. QLED takes a different path by supercharging the traditional LCD setup with quantum dots. These are microscopic crystals that act like a specialized filter for a bright backlight. Think of them as a group of elite backup singers that make the main vocalist sound much more vibrant. Because they still rely on a backlight, they can reach brightness levels that would make an OLED panel sweat, making them fantastic for sunny living rooms. Interestingly, the blue light used to trigger these quantum dots is the same high-energy wavelength that can mess with your sleep cycle. While OLED wins on those deep, inky shadows, QLED dominates when you want colors that scream with intensity. Both represent a peak in material science that transformed our desks from bulky monitors into windows of pure light. Laser TV. You probably remember projectors as those noisy boxes hanging from the ceiling that only worked if you turned every single light off. Laser TVs take that old tech and flip it on its head by sitting right on your media console, just a few inches from the wall. They use a special ultra-short throw lens to stretch a tiny beam of light into a massive 100-inch image, almost instantly. Inside the casing, a high-powered laser fires at a DLP chip, which is essentially a sea of millions of microscopic mirrors. These mirrors flip back and forth thousands of times every second, directing light toward the screen or away into a light trap to create deep shadows. It is like having a hyperactive lighthouse keeper living inside your furniture. Because lasers are so incredibly focused, they produce colors that stay vivid, even when your curtains are wide open. A really clever part of this setup is the screen itself. It's covered in microscopic triangular ridges, designed to catch light coming from directly below while reflecting light from the ceiling away from your eyes. This keeps the picture from looking washed out during the day. Unlike the old-school lamps in a classroom projector that would dim or pop after a year, these lasers are rated for 20,000 hours. You could watch movies for 2 years straight without ever turning the power off before the light source even flinches. If you enjoyed this dive into laser tech, hit that subscribe button for more hardware deep dives. Drop a comment below about which display tech you still miss from the old days. I'll see you in the next one as we tear down more of our favorite tech.